Hello, I'm very excited to welcome the lovely Charles. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Donna, for inviting me. It's great being here. I'm Charles Harris. I'm a novelist. My background's in film. I started directing at the age of 9. Um, it was a little theatre on my grandmother's bookshelf. The actors were rather cardboard, and the audience was enormously um, positive. And I went on from that to she had lots and lots of paper, so I used to write on the back of sort of invoices and things that she had from her shop. So that's got me into writing, and I discovered that writing and directing were really great ways of getting out and doing real work. At school, they often you could find ways of avoiding serious work by doing some kind of creative writing, and I've never looked back. I still find it's a really good way of getting of avoiding doing real work. I've written um, two books, which one's a satire and one is a crime thriller. And I've got a new one coming out later in the year. Um, and a number of books on screenwriting because of my background in film.
So I'd like to ask, what's the point where you sat down and you said to yourself, I'm going to write a book?
Um, I can remember it fairly clearly, actually. Do you mean a fiction book or a non-fiction book? Because
Either.
um, the non-fiction was easy. The first thing I wrote, actually, I was doing some research for a novel, and I was looking, trying to. It was the police novel, which it took a long time, and finally came out as my second novel. In fact, Room 15. And I wanted to research the kind of slang that the police were using, and I don't know if you remember. I remember going into shops, and you had these little kind of gift books of slang, usually little funny things like Australian slang or
Yeah.
convict slang or whatever. But he didn't have any police slang. So I'd done a fair bit of research. I talked to some policemen and done research on the internet and was beginning to compile quite a lot. So I got in contact with the guy and said, "Would you like me to do one for your imprint on police slang?" And he's a lovely old guy. Worked out with one secretary in an office in East London, and he said, "Great, yes." And that was my first actual book. I then did two on screenwriting, as I said, because I used to direct. I was a film editor, then a film director and screenwriter, and I was approached by the Teach Yourself imprint, which it was a great series, Teach Yourself. I've myself been following the Teach Yourself screenwriting books as they had evolved, and in fact knew two of the writers because a group of us many years ago had got together to set up a screenwriting workshop, essentially to teach ourselves to begin with, and then to teach. We thought, well, we might as well teach other people what we've learned for ourselves, and discovered we'd set up the first screenwriters workshop in the world.
Oh,
There was not one before, and in fact there was only one book around fairly up to date on screenwriting. I mean, there were some very old ones from the 1930s which I don't much use, but Sid Fields was the only book around at the time. So people had come in and out, and some of the people who'd been involved in that had gone on to write Teach Yourself screenwriting, and they approached me to do their new updated series called Complete Screenwriting Course, which I was very pleased with. So that was a commission. So I got the idea when they basically gave me the idea.
and then what about
That
the fiction? Do you remember?
sorry.
What about the fiction then? What do you remember the moment?
Okay, so the fiction, I I've done just about every kind of film there is: documentary, drama, soaps, cinema, and I did a cinema film called Paradise Grove, which won some awards, and I was very pleased with, and then tried to set up the second, and it took about 10 years, and we were still trying to set up the second, and I was going to meeting after meeting, writing script after script, unpaid, I should add, because the film industry is a little bit like that. You do enormous amount of hot air, basically. I think there's more hot air in film than there is anything else. Certainly more than there is celluloid or nowadays pixels. So this was going on. I looked back and I thought, hang on a second. In these 10 years, I could have written 3 novels at least. Why am I wasting my time going to these meetings that are not going anywhere? So I sat down and wrote the first novel. That
So was the idea, if you always had an idea of a novel that you wanted to write, is there something you'd always had in the back of your mind? Or
No, I had ideas. Some of them were scripts that I'd been trundling around, uh, and some of them been hanging around a long time. But this particular one, I was particularly angry at the way tabloid newspapers were exploiting people, awful things that they would do, the awful things they would say about people. And when I get angry, I get curious. I think, well, so what makes people do these sort of awful things? What makes people write about people who can't fight back and write sometimes scurrilous and awful things? And generally, these people, I mean, the interesting thing is, as you start to get to know reporters, editors, they they're well educated. They're often very nice people outside of their own work, and yet somehow they get sucked into this toxic way of working. And I thought this was interesting. I thought so. The book that eventually became the Breaking of Liam Glass focuses on a young-ish reporter. He was Young Reporter of the Year a few years back, but it's not led him where he wanted to go. He's working on a local newspaper, and he's stuck. And then he hears that the is downsizing, like many local newspapers are, sadly. And it looks like they're going to go for cheaper, younger people who aren't so good because they can save money, and he'll be on the scrap heap. And then he stumbles on a scoop, a possible big, big story that could get him into the tabloids. The only problem is it's about a young kid who's been mugged, who's in a coma, Liam Glass in the title. And he's pretty sure from rumors he heard and from something he wrote about the kid earlier when he was trialing for Chelsea as a young kind of keen footballer in his teens, that he's the love child of a unknown but very well known, if he could find out the name, Premiership international footballer. And this would be big news. If he could get it, he could nail this. It would be big news. So he sells it to a tabloid overnight. He literally phones him up that night and says, "Look, I can do this," and slightly over eggs the pudding, and then realizes he can't actually prove anything. But there's a way he can push it forward if he tells a lie. And he gets contacted by a football agent who helps him. The only problem is now he starts, what he does by telling the lie is to put this kid's life at risk. So it's kind of suspense and crime along with satire.
so it sounds like you kind of had an interest in crime all along, even if you didn't necessarily realise.
It's strange that, yes, you find you're writing crime without, well, I found I was writing crime without even realizing it.
Yeah, if you're going to write what you're angry about, I think crime authors write what they're angry about or what scares them, don't they?
Hmm.
It's quite a lot.
And often the two go very close together
Yes,
because
indeed.
it does. I mean, what the newspapers are doing to our country scares me,
Yes.
and the way governments, kowtow to particularly certain elements of the press that are pushing them in certain directions. And I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good that people can't trust media anymore.
I mean, I'm not necessarily massively keen on social media, but I am glad now that lies get caught out really quickly.
Hmm.
Generally, especially politicians, they've got nowhere to hide anymore. So for that, I'm grateful. As long as it's
Yes.
Your truth is there somewhere.
Yes.
Mm.
It's interesting that I'm developing a spy novel as we speak. It's got a little way to go yet, but I was talking to someone who said, as a is actually a film producer. He said that one of the problems with spies, espionage nowadays, it's almost impossible to invent a legend because it's you're going to get caught out. There's no way you can put enough out on the internet to be convincing. So that, it could be that the whole of espionage is changing thanks to the internet.
So you had your finished book. What happened next? Your route to publication, shall we say?
Okay, so it it is a long and tortuous route.
It always is.
Yes, I sent it out with full of expectation and got a resounding silence, and then sent it again and started to get some responses. In fact, in the end I had three publishers interested, and one was very keen, and I talked to him, and I liked the way he was talking. I won't say who he is, for reasons that will become apparent soon. And we signed, and he said, "Yeah, I'm very keen. It's going to come out." And 3 years went past, and nothing happened. And we were getting towards the end of the contract, and I said, "Look, I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, what's going on?" I phoned him up, and by that time I got to know quite a few others on his list, and it turns out he loves making books, but not loves actually getting around to doing them, and even less marketing them. Um, and there were people there who were in a worse position than me in that their book had come out and he was doing nothing with them. They were just sitting there. So I phoned him up and said, "Look, and I was rather dreading he'll say, that he'd say, 'Oh, don't worry, I'll do it now,' because because then I'd be stuck with him." So I said, "Look, can I have the contract back?" And he said yes. And then I did a thing that probably annoyed a lot of people. It always annoys me when it happens to other people. I was having lunch with a screenwriter friend of mine who's also has published a few novels, and he said, "Send it to my publisher." And I sent it to uh, he's actually a British publisher working in Ireland in Marble City, Mark Turner, and I sent it to him, and he got back to me almost immediately and said it's the best thing he'd read for 18 months, which is tremendous. Um, and put it out. Um, and we got shortlisted for a couple of awards. We were um, number one in Amazon's Hot New Releases for Satire, and it did very nicely.
Nice. That's brilliant. So then what happened with the second book? Because usually, I mean, I found writing my second book horrendous. Um,
It wasn't horrendous. I'm sorry to hear yours was. I find every book's different in its own way. This is one I'd actually written a script of years and years ago. Uh, I'd I got very interested in amnesia. Now, there's been quite a lot of books and films about amnesia and crime. Um, at that time, there weren't. Um, but I thought, what happens when you lose a whole part of your life? It's like an investigation. It's like you doing a crime investigation into your own, in your own brain, and also discovering kind of things about yourself you probably wouldn't want to discover, which can be just a
yeah,
little bit scary. So I thought, what if a policeman had amnesia and he thinks he's witnessed a murder, but and someone's trying to kill him before he gets his memory back. So he's got a double investigation now. He's got to investigate the murder, at the same time keep his amnesia secret from his bosses, otherwise he'd get pushed off the case, and also investigate what's going on with him. He can remember the last uh, up to about 18 months before, and then there's a gap of 18 months. He thought it was summer, so now it's winter. He was having a party in the sunshine and now it's thick snow. He's wandering around North London, um, wondering where he is, why he's wearing a jacket he doesn't recognize. He's got money in his pocket he didn't think he had. There's blood on his hands, and his phones don't seem to have contacts, that mean anything to him. So it took a long time to develop and to work it out. At which point, other amnesia films started to pop out, like Memento and so forth. And I thought, oh, that's it. I'll give up, which is a stupid thing to do, but that's what I did at the time. And then after I'd published Leo and Glass, I came back to it. I thought, I've always liked this story. I want to, but maybe do it as a novel rather than try and do it as a film, which is what I did. It took a lot of research. Amnesia is fascinating. I can see why it's used a lot nowadays in crime, because it does add an extra level of tension. But it's also a challenge for the writer because half your character is missing, and memory is an important part of developing character. So that was interesting. Working out what kind of amnesia he had. I went along to the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery, which is down the road here in London, and talked to a woman who'd done a very interesting article on why most amnesia stories don't work or are technically wrong. And so, because I didn't want to be technically wrong. And one thing she was particularly concerned about was most stories with characters with amnesia, like sort of, Jason Bourne and so forth, they have amnesia, but they're totally functioning. And she said it's extraordinarily unusual. Most people with amnesia have dysfunctional elements to their character. There's things that aren't working because their brain is busy trying to sort things out. And there's a whole lot of stuff going on under the surface they're not even aware of that's taking up energy. It's very unlikely they would be like, sort of a normal functioning person. They would be struggling to keep going. So I made sure that my detective had some of that. There's things going on, sort of bits. Suddenly he sort of finds can't remember something, or his energy goes, or he's struggling to stay compos mentis, and also, like I say, to hide it, because of course it's going to be very evident very quickly if he's not careful. And there's at least one other detective who's convinced that he's a bad guy and is trying to pin the crime on him. So he's got to keep ahead of her as well. And then he goes home and it's like, what's his relation? His relationship with his wife seems a bit odd. What's going on there? What's happened in the last 18 months that he doesn't know about? So there was a lot of work that had to go into structuring it so that the character worked and the story worked.
Yeah, that sounds like hard work.
But it was fun. It was fun, hard work. I mean, hard work is, sort of digging up roads and things. I mean, it's still getting me out of doing a real job.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a picture saved on my phone, a screenshot of an idea that I want to write, but I know that I'm not a good enough writer yet, so I wouldn't even try. I think I'll try and write a few more books first, but I love the idea that it's given me, so I just know that I couldn't do it justice yet.
I admire that. I'm too stupid. I just go ahead and write it. Whereas I probably should wait until I'm a better writer. I thought, well, maybe I'll become a better writer if I get this done.
You've got years of screenwriting behind you, so you've got years of experience in writing.
That has certainly helped, and a bit of journalism as well. I mean, I've done a fair bit of other things, short stories. So there's no doubt about it that there is that under my belt. You can't gainsay the importance of just getting the words on the page.
Yeah.
I think probably the biggest mistake people make, and certainly the biggest mistake I've made in my life, is spending too long on one project. I mean, having said that, Room 15 probably. I think I came across a first draft of notes sometime around 1984. Not that I was writing it non-stop all the time by any means. I sort of obviously I put it away and then came back and had a look at it and put it away again. Because I found what happened was I sent it to my agent, and my agent said, such and such is very good, but such and such doesn't work. And when I was kind of younger and a bit kind of more callow, I thought, that's it. It doesn't work. Throw it away, start something else, which was rather stupid. And so when I got it back, I thought, actually, I think I can solve those problems. Sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down and being logical. And, if the character's there and the basic story idea is there, you can find the logical way around it. I don't know about you, but I hate books that do illogical things and just because to try and make the plot work. Trying to make it work and be logical, and at the same time surprise the reader.
Yeah.
And one of the nicest things is that everybody says how they are surprised by the twists, particularly as we get towards the end. The reviews I've had on Amazon have been tremendous, and they respond to the fact that you're kept guessing right to the very end.
Yeah, and that's one of my favourite things as well about my book. I think I completely threw people with how I ended it, and I was
Mm. Yes, it's a nice feeling that.
yeah,
Endings are underrated. Because endings are the last thing somebody sees. I think it's important. I think it's, I mean, Le Carre is very good at that. He will give you an emotional punch at the end that you're just not expecting. And I try to nick ideas from the best.
of course.
And
I did slightly create a rod for my own back though, because it meant that people wanted the second book like now. And I was like, yeah.
yes,
So yeah, whoops. They've still got to wait till July. They can't have it yet.
right.
And yeah, so I learned that lesson as well the hard way. How do you go about creating characters, and how do you choose character names?
Um, well, those are two separate questions. Um, creating characters. So, I mean, I find usually a part of a character comes to me fairly early on. Particularly obviously if it's a main character, but there's always more. I I find the best characters are partly based on three things. Partly based on someone I know. I find that's important, and that's partly research, but also I will often use people in completely different contexts. I doubt anyone ever will recognize themselves. I I was commissioned some years ago to write a kind of rural epic set in Portugal, big movie, and one of the characters, a grouchy old farmer with a shotgun, I based on my grandmother. Now, my grandmother was never a grouchy old farmer, and she never had a shotgun, but there was something about her salty humor and the way she spoke that really helped that character. Then I think you draw a bit on yourself. You can't not, and you have to. There's something, if you can't relate in some way partly to that character, it'll never come to life. And then there's some stuff you just have to make up. And it's kind of that comes together if you're lucky. The character comes to life. I find there's almost invariably one character that takes a bit longer and has more work than the others. And then the minor characters, similarly, I will, try to draw on people I know, and try to be surprising. I remember the film Boogie Nights. I mean, there's a character of a doorman. He's just a doorman. He has about three lines, but they cast this completely over the top camp actor, and it just brings the character to life. It's conversely, I remember when I was working on Brookside, the soap opera, we'd have a character for like a solicitor, and it was always a boring central casting solicitor. And you have to fight hard to say, firstly, this isn't what solicitors are like really anyway. Most of them are, they're not, middle-aged white dumpy men like you'd expect. That's just a cliche. And secondly, why not give this solicitor a bit of something, a bit of oomph, something different, something that's going to surprise people. I mean, he or she may only have some fairly bog standard lines about, you know, some contract or other to say, but at least they can bring them to life a little bit. So I try to do that with the minor characters, and I like my minor characters. They can be enormous fun. Names are interesting. Um, I think a lot of people get names really wrong.
Mm.
I think good writers spent a lot of time. Simenon used to famously write, he'd get a whole load of buff-colored envelopes and write first names and last names on different envelopes, and then keep moving them around until he kind of found two that matched in a way he liked. I think good names have a resonance to them. They're more than just a name. Um, they need to be right for the obviously need right for the age, right for the gender and so forth, but they need to give you something about the character. And it usually takes me a long time to find a name that has a good resonance. Um, and for the minor characters, again, particularly foreign characters, they can be quite tricky because, you know,
Mm.
how do you find out what a 15-year-old Ukrainian, boy's first name would likely to be? It's names of first names in particular in most countries are pretty age specific, so that's where the internet's really helpful. I find I go on and I'll check up, for example, football teams or whatever, and find out because they often give you ages, so you can find out what a 34-year-old Swiss woman is likely to be called, and sometimes you can just mix and match some first and last names just out of the Swiss national football team or whatever is appropriate.
Yeah, that's cool. I was really careful with names in my second book, and because they're foreign names, they've all got a meaning. So I was
Mm,
very, very thorough in and very specific in the names I chose, and they're all there for a reason. So if anyone wanted to look up what they meant, they'd find out that they're related to a character. That was important to me when I'd done it, but they're a nightmare.
names
I hate choosing names.
names are terribly important. I mean, it's worth if you're interested looking up what Conan Doyle called Sherlock Holmes initially. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was something far worse. Um, Catholic countries can be difficult, very difficult, because they have a very small prescribed list of names you're allowed to use. This is what I found with the Portuguese film. We had about five people called Luís because those were the names in the novel I was adapting, and you know, and that's what they would have been called.
Yeah, I think Iceland as well, isn't it? They've got very few names.
Do they? I shall try to avoid writing something set in Iceland then.
Yeah. I think their first names, is it their first names have got to be different, but their surnames, because they're whatever's daughter and whatever's,
Yeah, son and
then,
daughter. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, and you've got to make it pronounceable as well, I think. Even though you're
Mm,
reading it, you've got to be able to say it in your head. So with some
yes.
of the foreign names, you can't have some of the really difficult ones. If you can't
Yeah.
pronounce it, people are just going to go, "Brrr," and I
Yeah.
think that ruins it.
Yes. No, absolutely.
Which is why I hated reading War and Peace. I read War and Peace. I gave myself the challenge a couple of years ago, and the names were just impossible.
Really,
Uh,
I didn't find that a problem, but I mean, I think War and Peace is brilliantly written. I mean, it stands up as being a classic, but I wasn't too thrown by the names. But then I have learned lots of foreign languages, so maybe that helps.
yeah, no, I haven't. Yeah, it was a few years ago, but it doesn't end. It just doesn't really seem to have an end. It just sort
Mm.
of seems to go on and then it's finished. And it's like, oh, okay.
Well, maybe that's what War and Peace does in
Yeah,
real life.
true. Yeah, it's not my favourite book I've ever read, I must admit. Do you hide any Easter eggs in your books?
Um, what specifically do you mean? Because I mean, I know what they are in computer terms, but
Yeah, similar, I suppose, like personal things or music tastes or personal stories that no one else would know. that happened to you or to family?
Not really, no. I I did um, when I was working on Brookside as a director. I had the opportunity to name a couple of characters because somebody had to kind of just walk on and or refer to somebody, and I put a few people I knew in there, and then thought, well, what if they hate being mentioned? And I thought maybe I've, when it was broadcast, I mean, the event they didn't say anything, but they probably I don't even know if they even watched it, but um, and I put my father's name in there, but um, and as a Spurs supporter, many years ago, I remember in a script I did put a few Spurs football players in as characters, but um, I find I'm just trying. I'm so busy trying to make the thing work. I don't have time to think about things like that, and um, so not really. No, I mean, having said that, I mean, I do put in things that are my own personal um, grievances or annoyances or irritations. Or I did put in one person actually who really annoyed me, and I better not say who it was. He was a local councillor, and he did something really awful, and I gave him a job that was really very rude, which I better not say. Um, and that's in the first book, and I'm still waiting to be sued, but I haven't yet.
Oh yeah, I mean that's fun. I mean I literally wrote a book about wanting to kill someone that I hated.
Mm.
Um, but I got pulled up on one of my pet hates, which is people eating crisps. The sound of it,
Mm.
I hate. So I put that in my book, and someone said, of all the crisps I'd chosen, they weren't necessarily the crunchiest ones. Like it doesn't matter. I said I'd
You
still
mean you
have.
didn't research the most crunchy?
Well, no, she just argued that it wasn't. I'm like, it's the sound of the rustling of the packet, it's the chewing, it's everything. I can't, and especially stuck in a car with someone, I'm like, no, it was. But yeah, she laughed, and she did pull me up on that. I was like, yeah, love
Yeah, but
it.
it's fun to put your pet peeves in.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, they're
glad
not
to
too
do
hidden, but they're fair, but they everyone says never get on the bad side of a writer because you never know what's going to come to where you're going to be in the next book.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I had fun winding my colleagues up. I started my job about 3 weeks before my first book came out. And I needed holding names while I was writing, so I used their names because they were on the top of my head. And so when I came back from my lunch, I'm like, "Yeah, you've just kidnapped a child,"
Mm.
and stuff. And they're looking at me. I'm like, "No, really, you have." Yeah,
Yes.
bless them. They didn't really know me that well then either. But I don't think they really get me now. It's quite funny. Bless them. Um, is there a moment of your author career so far that you'd love to relive? It was so amazing. You'd like to do it again.
Um, I'm not much into reliving, I have to say. I mean, I've been very lucky. My career's been pretty good so far. It would be really nice, to continue. And I mean, the happiest points are where someone I really admire, particularly my wife, reads one of my books and likes it. And at the moment, she is halfway through my next book, which is coming out in October, and laughing merrily because it is a comedy crime. And she keeps on pointing out the lines that she likes that are funny, and I think that's great. So, so yes, at the moment, I am. That's probably the best it can get. If she's happy, then I'm happy.
Oh, that's lovely. Is she a harsh critic as well, though?
Very, very. So if she didn't like it, she'd say so. Definitely, it's a bit scary giving her stuff.
I know we all think we can take the criticism, and then sometimes it's like, really?
Oh no, I'm very calm. People criticize me. I walk away very slowly, walk into my room, and then punch the wall about 9 times.
Yeah,
And then probably admit to myself they might be right after all.
yeah, that's a depressing time as well, isn't it? When you know that you're wrong. So,
Yeah.
What do you like to do outside of writing?
Um, well, reading. I don't do nearly enough, but it is important. Um, Watching TV. I also do. I teach a martial art called Aikido, which is great fun. And the good thing about that is that for 2 hours on the mat, I'm thinking about nothing else. So everything else goes out the window, and I'm just focused on, on being in the moment. So it is a kind of meditation. So that's fun. Walking. I'm lucky you've got lots of nice places to walk around here, sort of Hampstead Heath and places like that. Um, and eating.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I can't complain too much.
no, definitely not. No, that sounds lovely. So you've talked about the next book. Well, you spoke a little bit. Do you want to speak a
Mm.
little bit more about? Obviously, we're going to speak again in October, but
Yeah, I'm not going to talk a lot about it because I don't want to preempt it. It's coming out. It's a comedy crime. It's called Play Me, and it's set in the Caribbean and about a British rock star who gets framed for murder. So I'm very excited. We've got a great cover. It's looking good, and now starting to plan. I've been very busy because Room 15 second edition only came out this month, so that's been keeping me busy, and that's been focusing a lot on that. And then I'm going to slowly have to move over onto the next one.
and then do you have plans after that? Do you have an idea for the book
I
after?
well, as I said, I'm working at the moment. Well, I've actually got two things. I've got a conspiracy thriller that's finished and just been to an editor, and I'm going to have to go back over it a bit, but it's more or less ready to go. And then I'm researching a spy novel, so which is historical, um, set at the end of the Second World War, which I think is a very interesting period because it's a time when people were starting things and creating things that are still here today. It is the foundations really of today's world and today's society, for better or for worse. So that's taking up a lot of my time as well.
Yeah, I bet. I was watching an interview, and someone's written a book saying 1946, and they said that it was a time that not many people seem to write about,
Yeah,
but really interesting, and people forget that actually the effects of the war went on for long after. Rationing continued for well into the 50s, didn't it? I think, and so yeah, I imagine that's fascinating to research.
it is. It is absolutely fascinating, and because people tend to, you say, a jump. They tend to jump from the war to 1950, and suddenly it's like the previous 4 or 5 years didn't exist. And they are very interesting.
Yeah. Talking about research, how do you go about it, and how deep do you go in? Do you get stuck down rabbit holes?
Um, I generally don't get stuck. I do go down a few rabbit holes, but you never know what's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm reading at the moment about just today. I was reading an online article I'd found about the French Resistance, and um, it's because it comes into the book, and I but you pick up odd little things, and you think, oh, that's interesting. They had to do that, and if they wanted this, they'd have to turn up with a chicken, and things, sort of. Um, there's it may not appear to be directly relevant, but even the oddest rabbit hole can lead you somewhere, give an insight into character that may never appear directly in the book, but it will certainly have an effect on the characters I'm writing about because they will know the sort of thing that I've just discovered.
How do you avoid info dumping as well when you write?
Um, I mean, I've written quite a lot in my screenwriting book about exposition, info dumping. The trick is it's not so much to avoid it. Firstly, understand people generally don't want information; they want questions. So if you've raised a question in someone's mind, as the reader's mind, they don't mind it being answered. So the trick is to get them interested enough in the question. So if you want them to know that you had to bring a chicken, maybe you need that bit of information for later in the story. Then you have to find a way of getting it in, which is either dramatically relevant, maybe someone has an argument about it, um, or raise the question, what am I going to have to bring? Um, and leave the reader a few pages and then kind of come up with the answer. So there's many ways of distracting the reader through through mood, I mean, the best way is through action. If somebody needs that information in order to achieve a goal in the story, then no one's going to think that it's info dumping. They're just going to assume it's part of the story. And it's only later that you then come good on that information that you needed. I remember Connie Booth saying when they were writing Fawlty Towers, if they needed a bit of exposition, they always put it into a joke.
Mm.
Because the joke has its own reason for being there. No one minds having a joke. And then later on, you found that, when you need to know the silver spoons were in the cupboard, it had already been planted in your mind through the joke they did earlier. And then there's distraction. I remember, I think it's Humphrey Bogart who said if he ever had exposition to say, he hoped that the director would ensure there were two camels humping in the background.
Oh goodness. Yeah.
So I think there's never an excuse, but sometimes it's being aware that you're doing it. Sometimes you don't, you think, sort of you write something in and somebody else says, well, actually, that feels a bit dumped in. And then you go back and have a look at it.
I mean, for me, I like when I read to learn something as well. And sometimes you need that little bit, not
Mm.
necessarily info dumping massively, obviously not pages worth. But I do like learning something when I
I think
read.
people do. I think
Yeah.
absolutely. I think readers do. They want to learn. It's part of the fun of reading. In Room 15, there's a lot of information there about how police procedures work. Because I hate stories which get it wrong. I mean, I talked about a long time talking to police about how this investigation would really happen, as opposed to how it happens in stories. There's a lot of information, but that becomes part of the story. There's a lot of information about amnesia, but then he has to find out about amnesia to find out what's going on, what kind of amnesia he's got. Is it the kind where you can't create new memories, or is the kind where you've lost bits of the past? In his case, he's got a bit of both, like I was saying, because he's still not clearly functional. So some of his new memories go astray, but in the whole, basically, it's that bit of the past. And then are there other holes in the past? And what does that mean? Because there's things like fugue states. Fugue state is where people go wandering off, thinking they're a completely different person. Is he, so he has to investigate that. So we kind of investigate it with him, trying to work out alongside him what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, they're great stories for crime stories, aren't they? They're great things to use, but you really do have to research them to get it
Mm,
right.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure that I have in most cases. Certainly, looking at the reviews I've got, have been, I've not. I don't think anyone's picked up on any of that, on any mistakes they found either in the psychology or the police side.
If you had anyone pick up something in a review that really surprised you?
I think what surprised me with Liam Glass with the first one was looking at the Amazon reviews and how often words like gripping came up. Because I wrote it basically as a satirical, funny, angry rant, if you like, about this guy who's both kind of an anti-hero but also a bit of a cork that keeps bobbing up. Because I keep throwing things at him. I love characters where you can just throw things at them and somehow they manage to cope. And so, all the way through the story, he's kind of bobbing, being pushed under the surface, awful things happen. You think, that's it, must be the end of everything. And then he bobs back up again. He's arrested. chased by, he finds himself in the middle of a riot. He's got, I mean, people are possibly going to die because of what he's done. He's sacked by all sorts of people, and he sometimes keeps on going. Um, um, but it was kind of like, a very personal way of writing a story. And in some ways, it was personal because although I've never been in that situation as a journalist, I've been in that situation. I think we all have in jobs where things are going wrong, and you have ambitions and they're not quite working out. So when people wrote it was gripping and a page turner, I thought, wow, that really surprised me and pleased me.
And if you had any really funny reviews,
Funny reviews.
yeah. I mean, some people write crazy stuff in the reviews. I don't know if you've ever heard Mark Binnon and people talking about their reviews or the letters they used to get.
No, the oddest one I got, I didn't find it funny at the time, was with actually the screenwriting book, which got a 1-star review, which said, book turned up with the cover bent. I thought, thank you. I only spent a year of my life writing this, and what do I get? The cover was bent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was reading something earlier and saying that the hardest part about being a writer isn't writing the book, it's getting people to read it. I think getting to review is also right up to them.
Yes, yes. I was quite. I mean, I do have. I, was quite pleased with the first one that I think we actually had something like 19 reviews on Amazon when we launched because of people who'd had a few advanced reader copies. But yes, I mean, reviews are very important.
Yeah, a message I keep drumming into people, even one of my friends who'd read my book, and I said, "Have you reviewed it?" And then she ignored the question. And I asked her again and said, "Have you reviewed it?" And she's ignored the question. So I'd ask her again
Mm,
until she gets the idea that I would really quite like her to review it. I mean,
yes.
and that's a friend. I mean, seriously.
Funny enough, I'm listening to a podcast at the moment by Thomas Umstead. And if you listen to his podcast, he's very good novel marketing. Does very good podcast, and the latest one is about how to increase the number of reviews you get. So I recommend listening to that if you're interested.
Yes, I think I'm going to need to start listening to stuff like that actually. Now I'm self-publishing, I'm going to have to learn some stuff. Um, have you read any outstanding books so far this year?
Yes, quite a few. I've just read um, a tremendous satire on the environment, the way we treat the environment, called Venomous Lumpsuckers, um, which is which basically sends up the whole idea of sort of trying to essentially undo the bad we do by doing something else that's supposed to be good. So I mean, she has these venomous lumpsuckers are very apparently in real life quite intelligent fish whose habitat is about to be destroyed by some mining company, and they have these various things, but legally they can do. It's okay to exterminate a species as long as the equivalent to plant a tree or something. Um, and he really does send that up beautifully. Also in the environmental um, area, there's not a funny book, but a very moving book called The Overstory by Richard Powers, which has a tree on every page. It's very much a love story to trees, but also very strong. It's a saga. It kind of goes through about 100+ years of following different characters. And then I've just read and seen, a very good friend of mine gave me the book and the video of Devil in a Blue Dress, which is a classic crime noir. And it was very interesting. I'd seen the movie a long time ago. I hadn't read the book. And reading the book and then watching the movie again, it was a fascinating and interesting experience, which in fact I'm going to probably put on my blog as a review because I think it was very interesting indeed. So I've had, quite a lucky time. And then I've just I read Tracy Chevalier's latest book, The Glassmaker, and in fact interviewed her for my for the local paper. That's that's a very good book. I've had a good time reading. I've managed to get a few books read this year.
Yeah, I'm finding it tougher than normal to read this year, but I've read some incredible books as well, so it's good. Um, we met at Crime Fest just over a week ago, was it? Has it only been a week?
Yes, and the previous year.
Yes. So my first question is, are you appearing at anything else over the summer? My second question is, have you ever fanboyed over any authors that you've met?
Um, I'm doing something for National Crime Reading Week on the 26th of June in my local West Hampstead Library, which should be fun. I'm looking forward to that. That's the only thing I've got booked in at the moment, apart from talking to you later in the year,
Indeed.
which I'm looking forward to. Um, what was the other question? Fanboying.
Yeah.
I did, I have to say, walking across Hampstead Heath, for about 3 years, I kept passing this guy and thinking, he looks like John le Carre, who I knew lived fairly close by. So after 3 years, I plucked up the courage to sort of grunt at him. And then 3 years later, actually plucked up the courage to actually speak to him. And he was tremendous. In fact, I did present him with my latest book very cheesily. And he wrote a really nice letter back. Lovely guy. Yes.
But they are though. I mean, we spent time with Lee Child at Crime Fest, and he's just the most ordinary man you could possibly meet. It's
Mm.
incredible, really. You know, he's probably one of the most famous authors in the world, and he's just Lee, you know.
We exchanged words in the gents, which I suspect you didn't.
My friend was a smoker, so
All
he
right.
was outside quite a lot smoking. So
I sometimes wonder whether I should take up smoking. It seems to be a good way to meet people. Unfortunately, it also shortens the amount of time you have to meet people. So.
yes, indeed, exactly. Just passive. This
Right,
is the trick. You don't actually have to smoke, but
right.
just tag along and it works.
I have to
um,
work on it.
yeah, I just recommend it over, but you know, when your friends smoke and it was nice weather, then you get to chat to each other for a while. Then, like Margate, she was proper drooling over here, my friends, and I'm just like,
Mm.
no idea who he is. Like literally no clue.
I was on a panel with him. He was very good.
I know, I was there,
Good
I was
fun.
watching.
Yeah.
Yes, you were very good as well.
Thank you very much.
You held your own. You were
Well,
very
he was very generous, and he gave permission by being humorous. He gave us permission to be humorous.
Yeah, he's a very nice man, actually,
Mm.
even though I didn't know who he was. I know now. I was very, very thoroughly educated on Facebook as to who he is.
And I've seen clips of his new series Bookish, which looks like it could be very good
It
indeed.
looks absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I can't wait. I haven't even got a date yet. They just said July,
Mm.
not even a date. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And they've already confirmed the second series, and the first one isn't even out. So
Yes, and they're
someone
obviously
must be
very.
confident in it.
I think that means they've done foreign sales, basically.
Yes. Indeed. Well, I don't think I have any more questions for you at the moment, unless you think there's anything really obvious I have to ask you.
No, I don't. I think we've covered an enormous amount of ground.
You have. And I know that you have your book to hand, so
I
make
have
sure that you show it off so
this
that everyone
is,
knows what they're going to
yes,
go and
this
buy.
is the second edition of Room 15, which I'm really pleased with. It's, Blue Coast Publishing are bringing out, and I just brought out this month, in fact. So, and you can find it on Amazon and in all good bookshops for to order hardback, paperback, and Amazon for ebook all around the world.
Marvelous. And if
Um,
anyone ever wanted a signed copy, would they be able to get one from you?
they can, if they contact me directly, yes. My
How would they
website
do
is
that?
charles-harris.co.uk, or you can just Google Charles Harris author. If you Google Charles Harris, you'll find I'm the one who doesn't play for Miami Dolphins, which might surprise you. Um, Also, if you go to my website, um, you can get a free book of short stories, my book, The Cupboard, with a novella called The Procedure. You can download for free by joining my mailing list, which I send out roughly once a month, usually with a review of a crime book or film or some related article. No spam, no third parties, just a bit of light entertainment and a free book. And you can also, and you can always contact me directly through my website anyway.
Oh, I know what I'll be doing when I finish this as well. I need to sign up. I don't think I've
Great.
signed up.
That'd be good to have you on board.
Marvelous. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Donna. It's been good fun.